Hello, I am Myra Taylor, and this is my comparative book review. I will spend time today discussing two tomes of Grading Excellence, Grading from the Inside Out by Tom Schimmer and Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman. Tom Schimmer is an education author, speaker, and consultant. He began his career as a classroom teacher. He spent 7 years in the classroom and another 13 years as a school-based and central office administrator, where he was responsible for building the instructional capacities of teachers and other administrators. He presents internationally on assessment, grading practices, and educational leadership, which are his areas of expertise. Joe Feldman has worked in education for over 20 years as a teacher, principal, and district office administrator. He graduated from Stanford and Harvard School of Education. He is a sought-after presenter on improving the accuracy and equity of grading. Both authors have similar points of view and common ideas regarding grading reform. These texts are great companion texts. What are they about? I am so glad you asked. Let's go. In Grading from the Inside Out, Schimmer offers simple steps to support the challenging move to standards-based grading. At the beginning, Schimmer talks about balanced assessment. He says the balance between formative and summative assessment is analogous to the relationship between practice and games, between rehearsal and performance. This analogy surfaces throughout the text. It offers one of the easiest explanations for stakeholders regarding the differences and uses of summative and formative assessment. And I can tell you, as a parent of school-age children, this analogy would make perfect sense to me as I wondered, or if I wondered, what was the difference in the assessments and how the teachers were grading my children. He also offers that we must change how we think about grading, or changing our mindset to that of a growth mindset. We know that everything starts in the mind, every idea, every inclination, every practice. And if we can change our minds about grading, that's the beginning of the work to changing our practices. Schimmer's ideas about reassessment and student reflection support the formative assessment practice of activating students as learners and closing respective learning gaps. Schimmer's ideas about homework help clarify the ongoing debate around this topic. Practice is where children have room to risk, experiment, and even fail without fear of penalty. What parent doesn't want their child to have an opportunity like that? Thinking about homework that is learning-centered, reasonable, high quality, and considering if the students are ready for this practice may be shifts for some educators. Some books tell you to dismantle the entire system. This is a book that teaches you how to work within whatever system you're a part of to make your grading more accurate, reliable, and a true reflection of student learning. Feldman's Grading for Equity shares how grading practices must blend theory and practice and neutralize institutional biases, which are practices that reward students who have privilege and penalize students without said privilege. For the purposes of this discussion, privilege can be described as support at home, resources such as laptops, internet, time, and prior knowledge. Effective grading practices should protect students from teacher bias and should not rely on extrinsic motivation, points, or as Daniel Pink describes in his book Drive, as carrots and sticks. The book reveals how grading practices that are accurate, bias-resistant, and motivational will improve learning and minimize grade inflation and reduce failure rates. Feldman advocates for grading that reduces the importance of homework and motivational grades to the barest minimum as a way of increasing students' intrinsic motivation and consequentially their learning. He urges grading that focuses less on compliance and more on actual knowledge and skills. Here's a key quotation from the text. It's a much better life lesson to learn to do things that teachers say because it will help you learn than to do things that teachers say because otherwise you'll lose points. Grading from the inside out and grading for equity are similar in ideas and theory. There's a lot of crossover. Let's look at how the books intersect. The books are great companion texts in that the authors share common ideas and theories. First, traditional grading practices perpetuate achievement gaps and invite biases. When we're giving students points for bringing in school supplies or canned goods for Thanksgiving, when we average points, when we assess students only one way, we are inviting in gaps, and our biases are driving some of those practices. Every student does not have canned goods to bring in for the extra points, so those students are at a deficit or a disadvantage, and that is not fair. That's just one example of some of the grading practices that I've been privy to, and quite honestly, I've done myself, and I'm not proud of it. Educators should stop grade averaging, as I just mentioned. It doesn't work. A 0 and a 50 are both an F. Standards-based grading is the way to truly report student learning. There are specific grading practices that are more equitable, and there are strategies to solve common hiccups and concerns, and evidence of those practices are in both books, and evidence of the effectiveness of those practices. The standards-based mindset of giving students full credit for what they know, redefine accountability, and repurpose the role of homework is shared in both books. It crosses over. People are not motivated by extrinsic motivation or carrots and sticks. It may begin that way. People may do something, students may do something to get bonus points, but it's not sustainable. We learn about the research on motivation and equitable teaching and learning, as well as establishing a rock-solid foundation and a true north orientation toward equitable grading practices in both books. A growth mindset is necessary in order for educators to embrace changes in grading practices. And as we said earlier, it begins in the mind. The battle is in the mind. You have to start with a growth mindset where you are willing to learn and undo some of the things that you've learned, or as we've said, unlearn some of the things that you have learned about grading in order to grow as an educator and also in order to help your students achieve by accurately assessing what they know and not grade averaging or using carrots and sticks. Something I will always remember, my star moments from grading from the inside out, are twofold. First, the 5 myths of standards-based grading resonated with me because I've said and believed each and every one of them. First, standards-based grading makes it easier for students. It is more work for teachers. Yes, I've said that too. There's only one way to implement it. Standards-based grading does not hold students accountable. I've definitely said that. And it will leave students unprepared for the real world. Tom Schimmer debunked these myths with sound claims and examples and even facts. While these myths represent real concerns about standards-based grading, Tom Schimmer is helping our learning community to address these concerns head on. He is helping us to engage in meaningful conversation meaningful and life-changing conversation about how we implement sound and fair assessment practices. Another moment for me was a discussion regarding assessing student attributes and using rubrics with clear performance criteria. As an English teacher, I've always believed in the power of rubrics. However, I found myself at a loss when it was time to assess the 4 C's: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. This actually validated some of the work that has been done in my district around 21st century skills, PLCs, and PBLs, or project-based learning, and using rubrics to assess these skills. I was so excited to see this when I read the text. I like how the book uses tables to show how to assess the skills versus common misconceptions about how these skills actually present in student work. This was extremely useful as an instructional leader, as I can lift the information from the book, giving Shimmer full credit, of course, and use with the teacher leaders in my school. My star moments from Grading for Equity were aligned. I chose the 3 pillars of grading equity and equitable grading practices as my star moments. Again, I appreciate the practicality of these 2 ideas, and they are very accessible. The pillars explain what is required for a grading structure to be equitable, and the practices are examples of systems and strategies teachers may use to fairly grade across the board. Reframing homework is something that has come up repeatedly in both books and even in some other research that I've done, and I believe right there is a safe space to begin, there and with rubrics. There aren't many drawbacks or pushbacks to the book. I cannot find any research at all that says standards-based grading does not work. So the only pushback I can identify would be from those for whom the books are written, teachers. I can see teachers who are firmly married to the 5 myths, or the way we've always done it, or the way it was when I was in school. I can see those teachers having a hard time accepting or embracing the fundamental changes suggested in the books. But if we are really trying to and wanting to address equity in our schools, we must consider these suggestions. We want all students to see the game, not just those who come equipped with the height or other advantages to see over the fence. One drawback to Grading for Equity is that Feldman talks down to teachers in some ways. He continuously references how teachers are probably unaware of how their grading software works and how they probably calculate grades incorrectly, basically being unable to perform simple mathematical tasks that are related to their job duties. I think that's unfair, and I think it's a gross generalization that does not give teachers the respect and consideration that they are due. I found Grading for Equity to be an easier read than Grading from the Inside Out. With the exception of the occasional slight towards teachers' mathematical ability or awareness of grading software, I found it the more palatable of the 2 books. The summary of concepts and questions to consider at the end of the chapters helped push my thinking and generate new ideas, which was very similar to the questions for learning teams in Grading from the Inside Out. I love the teacher testimonials in Grading from the Inside Out. The narrative nature of those teacher insights felt familiar, almost like listening to a colleague share in a meeting. I believe both books will be a benefit to any teacher, young or veteran, and instructional leaders everywhere. They are practical guides to grading and equity and worth the time spent reading. Thank you.